Hi everyone, I'm Abigail. This is Bentley, and welcome to another Two Kids interview. We're joined by best-selling mystery author Robin Stevens. Ms. Stevens is best known for her murder most unladylike book series. She has also written the Guggenheim mystery, Mystery and Mayhem, and the Ministry of Unladylike Activity, which has a sequel coming this October, The Body in the Blitz. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Most children's authors we've talked to tell us how their books have been influenced by their own childhoods. You are a murder mystery writer, though, so we were wondering if that's the case for you or not.
Um, it is with everything but the murders. I'm glad and lucky I've never had a murder happen to me. But I have loved reading mystery stories since I was very young. I started off with Enid Blyton and Nancy Drew and Encyclopedia Brown. I read all of those books. And then I went to boarding school when I was sort of 13 years old, and I was reading murder mysteries. I started reading Agatha Christie, and I was at boarding school, very much like the boarding school that Daisy and Hazel go to in Murder is Bad Manners. And here it is, Murder is Bad Manners. You've got it as well. And I wanted to write about a school that was like mine, friends that were like mine, a childhood that was like mine, basically at this boarding school. But I wanted to add in my favorite kind of story, which was a mystery story, which was a murder mystery. So the murder mysteries are all made up in my head. I read lots of other people's murder mysteries. I read Agatha Christie, and lots of other authors like that, and that's where I get the idea for the murders. But all of the stuff about Daisy and Hazel and their friends and their lives, those are all taken from my life and my friends' lives. So parts are real, parts are not.
Did you write a lot as a child?
I did, yes. I actually was writing even before I could write, because I would come up with all these stories in my head, and I would want to put them down. I'd try to tell them to my parents, and I would see my parents writing. Both my parents like loved reading and books, and they would be writing, and I would just sort of scribble, thinking that I was writing too. So I wrote lots of stories just kind of in scribbles, and then I actually learned how to write. And I think the first story I wrote, I was 6, and I wrote about a unicorn who was adopted. And then I just kept on writing. I would write, fantasy stories, make up characters in my head, and sort of draw them and then write about them, write about my toys. So I wrote a lot as a child, and I think that was really helpful for me. I think it really helped me grow as a writer.
Do you have a favorite red herring that you've used in one of your books?
Ooh, a favorite red herring. I I like there's one in this one that I quite like. It's they find a footprint, and it's quite a big footprint, and they think, well, this must be a man's footprint, and then they realize that actually no, it's a woman's. And that was because I have very big feet, and people are always looking at my feet and thinking that I'm like wearing bigger shoes than I need to or something. So that was something that came from my own life, and that was something that I used to trick them, and I like that one a lot.
What is your process when putting a book together? Do you decide
So
the end before the middle, or do you put it together in order?
Um, so I decide the crime first. I think about like where it's going to happen and who does it, who the murderer is, who the victim is. And I spend quite a few months kind of thinking about that in my head, writing down like in notebooks and stuff. Like I have lots of notebooks on my desk. Um, and and then only when I've worked out everything about the murder, who else is there, who the suspects are, what their motives are, then I start writing. So I kind of know the middle of the book first, weirdly, but then I write sort of A to Z. I have the mystery and the murder in my head, and then I write the beginning, and I write about the detectives like solving the case, from the beginning to the end. Um, but yeah, it takes me quite a few months to come up with a crime that I think is good enough. I've just finished a book. I've just finished The Body and the Blitz, which is coming out in October, and it looks like this on all my notes for it. And it's going to go away to be printed. So I'm thinking at the moment about the next book in the series and where that will be set and what's happening in it.
One book we did not mention in the opening was Return to Wonderland, an anthology book where you wrote one of the stories. Were you worried at all if writing a story when the Wonderland books are so iconic?
It's a really good question. I think they're so iconic that I actually wasn't worried because I know that thousands of people have written their own ideas about what Alice in Wonderland is. There are all these films and TV shows and comic books and that all kind of use Alice in Wonderland. So I kind of felt like I was just another fan, writing my own thoughts. But Alice in Wonderland is a story that I'm feel quite connected to. I grew up across the road from where the real little girl who kind of inspired Alice, where she lived. And I had a very similar childhood to hers. We both grew up in Oxford colleges because our fathers kind of ran the colleges we worked in, which is a really unusual childhood that almost nobody has. But Alice and I both had that. So I feel very quite connected to her. And I wanted to write sort of about being a child in a college as well as about Wonderland and all that sort of fun stuff. So I wrote about her older sister called Ina. And I wrote a story from sort of Ina's perspective, what she's doing while Alice is in Wonderland. And I found that just really fun. And again, I could write about my own childhood and my memories of being a child in this weird Oxford college that only really adults go to, and then me.
Can you tell us about a time when you were doing something and you noticed someone or something and thought, I need to put that in a book?
That's a really good question. So the book that has just come out, actually, no, it's not. Yesterday, when I was recording this, the eighth book in the series came out in the US, Top Marks for Murder. But the seventh book in the series is Death in the Spotlight. And when I was planning that one, I love going swimming, and I went to a swimming pool, and I was getting changed, and there was a woman in the changing room who came up to me and started asking me questions about, sort of, or is the pool heated, and where do we get changed and all this sort of stuff. And she just kept talking, and she was talking and talking and talking. And I just sort of glazed over because she was asking me so many questions. And I thought, this is really interesting. This is such an interesting person to come up to somebody, a stranger, and start like just chatting like that. And I wanted to think about that. And I thought this would be a really cool person to put into a book. And so she, not her, but I use that idea of somebody talking and talking and talking in this book a lot. So yes, I won't give away the plot. Yes.
How do you come up with your ideas for your different mysteries?
So the murder part always from other people's books or TV shows. You can see behind me I've got a lot of mystery stories. This is my murder mystery library, all these other authors who've written murder mysteries. So I use that a lot for the murder parts. In terms of sort of the setting, I like to choose a setting I know well. So I write a lot about Daisy and Hazel's school, Deep Dean. That's where three of the books are set because that was the school I went to. In Mistletoe and Murder, I write about the Oxford College that I grew up in. I move it to Cambridge in this book, but it's really the place that I grew up. Um, this is a Spoonful of Murder is an important setting for Hazel. It's set in Hong Kong. I didn't grow up there, but a lot of my friends did. So I interviewed my friends about what it was like to grow up in Hong Kong, and I used that as well as I went to travel to Hong Kong when I was researching it. So it's from lots of different places. It's people I meet, like I was saying about Death in the Spotlight. It's places I go, places I'm comfortable, friends, family. I kind of get inspiration from all over the place, and it all kind of goes into my head and comes out as a book.
After you finish your first draft, how much do you revise the book?
Ooh, that is a good question. And it's a lot more than I think I would have expected before I started writing professionally. I think from the first draft to the second draft, I get rid of about half the words. I change about half of the words. So I'd write a full book, but it would be full of things that were wrong, like too many characters, the wrong kind of characters. The characters go to the wrong places. I have the wrong subplots in there, and my editor helps me by thinking sort of like, maybe what if you took away this character, or what if instead of going to this place they go to this place, or I don't really understand this part of the mystery, what if you changed something that happened here to affect something here, and that would make it work better. So I change a huge amount. I work on my laptop that I'm talking to you on, and I work on a Word document, so I can just delete loads of stuff, put in loads of new stuff. And the thing that I've got now, this is sort of 4, 5 drafts in, might have like, yeah, it's half or a third of the words that I started off with. but that just means it's so much better because I've been able to work then time on the story enough to sort of make it really flow very well, really all tie together, have all the right characters. So I find it really fun to do editing. Hard, but really fun.
When you started writing children's books, were you worried at all if you could do it?
Yes, I think that's a really good question. I don't know if I was worried so much about children's books, but I think just writing books is so hard and it's so long. My shortest book I think is Murder is Bad Manners, and that one is 65,000 words, and that's an awful lot of words. And it took me, I think, well, it normally takes about 3 or 4 months to write a first draft. Um, and you just have to keep writing it. Every day you would maybe write like, I might write like a thousand, 2,000 words, and that's hard to be imagining all those new scenes in your head. And always still, even now, I'm sort of 16 books in and I get to the middle of a book and I just feel like I feel so upset and so worried because I feel like I'll never get to the end of the book. I'm no good at writing. I don't know how to plot this story. um so I think I always question myself and I always wonder if I'm good enough. I think that's part of writing, and you just have to ignore it and keep going to the end. um but I guess also, it is hard to write a children's book because you have to make it really interesting. Like adults, you can write a more boring book because adults will keep going with something when they've started it because they think, well, I can't stop now. I'm halfway through, I've got to keep reading. But kids will just get bored and go away. Like if you're not writing a book that's interesting enough, a child will just do something better.
What writer has had the most influence on you?
I think for mystery stories, definitely Agatha Christie. Um, I I love her plots. I think she's so clever. I think she writes in such a sort of engaging way. I started reading her when I was 12, um, which maybe was a little young, but you can, like, she writes so clearly and so easily that you can just really get into the stories and get really hooked on them. And I think that's such a talent in a writer. For in terms of not crime novels, there's an author called Dinah Wynne Jones who writes fantasy stories. One of her books was turned into a movie, a Miyazaki movie called Howl's Moving Castle, which you might have seen. And I think she's a fantastic writer. She writes such amazing characters. They feel completely real. They feel like your friends. And she's really influenced me as well. My dog, who's sitting down at my feet, is called Howl after Howl's Moving Castle.
What advice do you have for young people who want to write?
Um, I think the advice I always give sounds so obvious. I think people are sort of not sure if it's really good, but I think it's the only advice I can give that will cover everybody. And is first of all to read a lot, like read everything you can, read all the stories that you can get your hands on, especially stories in the genre, in sort of the type of story that you want to be writing. So for me, obviously, mystery stories. I read a lot of murder mysteries. I was reading mysteries from a very young age, and that really helped me. Because if you read a lot of stories, you'll work out how other authors do it, how they structure sentences, how they create plots and characters. And especially when you're reading crime stories, you want to write crime, you're seeing sort of what needs to be in every single crime story. There has to be a criminal and a victim and a setting and a crime. So you see how that works, how other people do it. So read a lot, and also be writing a lot. And you may be writing a lot in school, which is really great, but I think it's good to be writing outside of school as well, because you don't have to go with an assignment. You can write about anything that you really like, write the story that you really enjoy. And often in school as well, your teachers are telling you, pay attention to grammar and spelling. And that can sometimes take the joy out of writing a little bit when you're really trying to sort of make something that's polished. I think you should also be trying to write, just literally put words down on the page, have fun, write something exciting and adventurous and funny that isn't spelt right and looks nice. Just go have fun.
That's big advice. Do you have a smaller tip, something you do when you're writing that maybe a lot of people don't?
Um, Smaller tip. I think something that people ask me a lot, and I think worries a lot of people is, what do I do about writer's block? And often I think people think that writer's block means that they're not a good writer because they feel uncreative when it happens. But actually, writer's block happens to all writers. I get it all the time. I think it's a sign of being a writer. And it just kind of means that something's gone wrong in the story. Like you've written something that doesn't work with your story. Your character is doing something that doesn't work with their character. And when that happens, just step away. Like don't just sit there at your, notepad or your laptop and feel upset at yourself, just go and do something else, like cook a meal, like bake something, go for a walk, go swimming or something. And while you're doing that, your brain will be working. Like I think this is a really important tip. Understanding that a lot of writing isn't actually writing. It's not actually sitting there and writing. It's your brain working. So your brain will keep working even if you're not actively writing, and it will be trying to fix the problem. And sometimes you might just be like, remember, like I'll be brushing my teeth for this latest book, and I had a breakthrough. I knew what I needed to do, and my brain had been working all day, even though I hadn't been actually, writing. And then I had the idea, and I ran and I wrote it down in my notebook, and that's what I've written in my new book, Buddy and the Blitz. That was the idea I had brushing my teeth. So don't worry about things like writer's block. Your brain is writing even when you're not sitting down and trying to write.
Other than the Body and the Blitz that comes out this October, is there any other upcoming project that you can tell us about?
Good question. At the moment, the only thing that I can tell you about is that there will be a third book in the Ministry of Unladylike Activity series. There isn't a US release for these books yet, but they're out in the UK. This is the first one. I hope there will be one day, but we're still working through US titles. US just gotten Top Marks for Murder, and you're getting Death Set Sail, which is the ninth book, I think later this year, early next year maybe. So that's coming for you guys. For me, I'm writing the third in the Ministry of Unladylike Activities series. And I do have more stuff coming after that, or other stuff that I can't quite talk about yet. But I'm always thinking about sort of 3 books ahead. I've got all these ideas in my head. I know I'll be writing a lot more books. So yeah, without giving anything away that I shouldn't be able to, there's lots more coming from me.
We hope they will all be available here.
I do too.
Finally, it's time for our Turbo 10. 10 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I hope so. Let's do it.
Number 1, what is your favorite phrase to use?
One of my very first ever phrase that I ever used when I was tiny, my first ever sentence was "don't do that." And I think that is a good example of me as a person. Don't do that.
Number 2, what is one subject you'd love to learn more about?
One subject I'd love to learn more about is history. It's endless. It's massive. I love it. It's fascinating.
Number 3, what is your go-to snack food?
My go-to snack food is jelly beans, and I have jelly bean dispenser.
Number 4, what was your favorite book growing up?
My favorite book growing up, anything by Diana Wynne Jones. Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones.
Number 5, if you could teleport somewhere right now, where would you go?
I would go to, I think I'd go to Hawaii, go to the beach in Hawaii.
Number 6, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
I would love to fly.
Number 7, what was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
The first cartoon I remember loving was Sonic the Hedgehog, very long time ago.
Number 8, what was your favorite rainy day activities?
It's got to be reading or watching TV. I love watching TV.
Number 9, if you could have any 3 dinner guests, who would they be?
3 dinner guests. I would not have Agatha Christie. I think we might argue. It'd be upsetting. I think I'd have Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula. I'd have Gerald Durrell, who had a zoo, and he's amazing. And I would have, I'm going to say Taika Waititi, because I really like Our Flag Means Death.
Number 10, what is the best piece of advice you were ever given?
Best piece of advice was ever given is from a poem, and it is "No feeling is final." I often get really hung up on how I'm feeling right now, and the poem is saying that everything changes, and that's really helpful to know.
You did wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that. And thank you so much for spending this time with us. We can't wait to read your future books.
Thank you. Thank you for talking to me. You guys are great.